the internet comes along, and what we were similarly promised, a brave new vista of highly targeted, interactive advertising, that we would have brand conversations with floor cleaners. And oh, by the way, TV's dead, so fuck that, right? Just forget about that, right? Now 15 years has elapsed, and that hasn't happened for similar reasons, I would theorize. In other words, we're human, and we don't want to talk to brands, and we don't want to do what you want us to do. We'll do what we want to do. And I remember, not so long ago, I remember hearing a client at a large Chicago food conglomerate, which shall remain nameless, and they said, and I remember they said to me, they said, we didn't have enough money to do advertising, so we did something digital instead. I really nailed the whole thing in a way that I couldn't, it summed up the whole thing for me. And about 5 years ago, I became familiar with the Bob Hoffman. How long have your blog been going?
7 years.
5 years ago, I was a nerd. Yeah. And a lot of people I respect in advertising started respecting his blog, so I naturally went right behind them. And I think in 2015, bizarrely, you're finally getting traction. This guy's spoken all over the world. You name it, he's been there. And his blog is, and part of it is, and I think it was in the invite too, he's analytical and he's critical and he's here and but he looks at things like from a reality point of view. And just recently, I was the 5 millionth visitor to his blog. I swear to God, it was me and 3 guys from Hungary. There's a dispute. And he's got 5 million people who visited his blog and listened to his wisdom, and you hear about it tonight. And I couldn't be happier to present the guy who I call Professor Bob Hoffman. And there you go.
Thank you, Vinny, and thank you, Escape Pod. Somehow I got Cape Cod and Escape Pod. Allegro, my slides, are they anywhere? Should I hit something?
Cosmos.
Okay. Anyway, that's where I was born. Thank you all for coming out tonight. I appreciate it. My name is Bob. I'm here to contradict pretty much everything you read and hear about advertising and marketing. I hope it's not going to be uncomfortable for you to stand because I have like 3 hours. The title of my talk is Marketers Are from Mars, Consumers Are from New Jersey. I'm sure you know Mars and New Jersey are very different kinds of places. One is an uninhabitable, desolate wasteland, and the other is a planet. Don't worry, this isn't water. I don't know why most of you are here tonight. I'm sure some smart people are here for the drinks, and some of you are here because the Bulls and the Blackhawks aren't playing tonight. And some of you just probably can't stand another dinner with your boyfriend. But I hope some of you are here because you have a feeling that there's something wrong, in the advertising business. And the thesis of my talk is that marketing and the marketing and advertising industries are currently in a state of great confusion. In fact, we're so confused we've lost touch with reality and also with average consumers, or as I like to call them, people. It's my view that consumers are basically simple creatures with straightforward needs and easily observed behaviors. Marketers, on the other hand, are strange and complicated bastards with weird customs and mysterious beliefs. We marketers are taught not to think simply. In fact, the whole practice of marketing is based on the conviction that there are forces at work in the minds of consumers that only trained specialists, us, are qualified to interpret. Thinking simply has been beaten out of us. You can't be taken seriously in any marketing or advertising organization if you suggest that the bulk of consumer behavior is perfectly obvious. You can't advance your career by speaking plainly and asserting that the reason people buy most stuff is because it's tastier, prettier, cheaper, works better, has better advertising, or is simply more readily available. That kind of thinking just won't cut it in today's world of professional complexity. To be taken seriously as a marketer, you need to think and speak in ways that no normal person in the history of civilization has ever thought or spoken. How we think and how consumers think couldn't be more different. Here's how marketers think. How can I engage consumers with my brand to create a community? How do I connect the authenticity of my brand with my target audience? How can I co-create with my target and develop a conversation? Here's how consumers think. Is there gonna be parking? Is this fucking thing gonna work? How vigorously are they gonna screw me? Is there anyone here who knows what the fuck he's talking about? Consumers want clarity and simplicity. Marketers want to complicate the shit out of everything. I believe we're blinded by complexity, and we are confusing complexity with diligence. Every day we agency people go to work and we have meetings and we have conference calls. We have briefings and we build PowerPoint decks and we write memos and we make presentations. We have uploads and downloads and offsites and insights. And as a byproduct of all this bullshit, every now and then an ad gets produced. Am I right? Everything is too complex and too confusing. We don't know what we're doing anymore. Are we selling products or having conversations? Are we curating content or doing branded storytelling or brand engagement or co-creating or building communities or what? We don't know what the hell we're doing anymore. The more elaborate and the more convoluted our processes have become, and the more dreadful our jargon has become, the farther away we've gotten from the people we're supposed to be influencing. Now, as we all know, there have been amazing changes in technology and media and communication. And these changes were supposed to bring radical changes to consumer behavior. But as far as I can tell, they've affected our businesses and our work environments far more than they have affected the purchasing habits of average consumers. Most people still go to the grocery a few times a week. They still buy their cars at the car dealership. They still go to restaurants. They still annoy the hell out of me at Starbucks. According to the US Department of Commerce, in the first quarter of this year, 6.5% of retail activity occurred online. 93.5% occurred in a store. According to eMarketer, 1.6% of consumer purchases are made on a smartphone. 98.4% are not made on a smartphone. Yet if you were to read the literature of our industry, you'd have to believe that we buy everything online and mostly on our mobile devices. Is there anyone here who's seen these numbers? I believe we've been operating under some highly questionable assumptions which have disconnected us from the thinking and behavior of average people. We have grossly exaggerated the role of brands in the lives of consumers. We have an immoderate and false faith in the death of traditional marketing practices and media. We have largely overstated the sales value of social media marketing. We are conveniently disregarding the alarming amount of sleaze, fraud, and corruption in the online advertising industry. We are abjectly disregarding people over 50 who are the most powerful consumer group in the history of the world. And we have grossly inflated the importance of advertising media at the expense of advertising creativity. Other than that, we're doing fucking great. I'm going to focus on 3 delusions that I believe are significantly responsible for our estrangement from reality. Get your drinks and sip them slowly. I have a lot to say. First is the brand delusion, second is the digital delusion, and third is the age delusion. All of these delusions have one thing in common. They take a little bit of truth, and then they distort it, then exaggerate it, then torture it to the point at which it does us more harm than good. But before I get to these delusions, let me tell you a little bit about myself, so you know what kind of crazy old fool you're hearing this from. I spent 41 years in the agency business. You think you're full of shit? I have a lifetime achievement. I started my career as a copywriter, and through a series of comic mishaps, I wound up as CEO of 2 independent agencies and the US arm of an international agency. Before I began in advertising, I was a science teacher. There are only 2 problems with that. 1, I don't know anything about science, and 2, I don't like children. I later went on to spend 1 year as the special assistant to the executive director of the California Academy of Sciences. One of the things that being around science and scientists taught me was a healthy respect for the scientific method. Scientists have to go through years of experimentation and peer review and anguish before they can say they actually know something. Knowing something, it turns out, is completely different from thinking you know something. So then I got into the agency business, and the first thing that struck me was that we really didn't seem to know anything. We thought we knew a lot of things. We had ideas about what makes good advertising, and we had ideas about how to change consumer behavior, but I couldn't find any facts. All I could find were the assertions and opinions of experts masquerading as facts. We did things that looked and sounded like science. We used the language and the tools of science. We had questionnaires and computer programs and clipboards, but we didn't use the scientific method. We rarely used controls for our research. We rarely repeated our studies to verify them. We never had peer review of our methods or our conclusions. We never asked third parties to replicate our studies to validate them. So over time, it led me to develop an obnoxious habit. I stopped believing advertising and marketing experts. If they don't have the facts and they can't explain them to me in simple, jargon-free English, I'm sorry, I'm skeptical. Nobel Prize-winning physicist Richard Feynman said it best. Science, he said, is the belief in the ignorance of experts. By the way, I went to the same high school, Far Rockaway High School in New York City, as Richard Feynman. I think he must have had the good teachers. Anyway, my wife is a Buddhist, and she tells me that in Buddhism there is something called the Eightfold Path. This is, as I understand it, a set of 8 principles about life. And the very first of these 8 principles is to see the world as it really is and rid yourself of delusions. So let's try to rid ourselves of some delusions tonight. Let's start with the first delusion, the brand delusion. As I'm sure you know, creating a strong brand should be every marketer's primary objective. And the highest goal of advertising is to create a strong brand. But our industry has taken these truths and hideously distorted them into silly fantasies. There's a widespread belief in our business that consumers are in love with brands, that consumers want to have brand experiences and brand relationships and be personally engaged with brands and read branded storytelling and co-create with brands. Let's listen to Saatchi and Saatchi, their description of what they call love marks. They reach your heart as well as your mind, creating an intimate, emotional connection that you just can't live without. It's very touching. Sadly, it's bullshit. In fact, according to Havas Media, in Europe and the US, people would not care if 92% of brands disappeared. perfectly honest here, I wouldn't care if Havas Media disappeared. I'm sorry if there are any Havas people here, it's just a stupid joke. I always piss someone off when I do it, but it gets a laugh. One consequence of all this bullshit is that we've spent almost 10 years and billions of dollars exhorting people to join the conversation about our brands. What I want to know is, what conversation? All you have to do is go to your Facebook page, and if you can read, you can see that no one is having a conversation about brands. A study by Forrester Research reported that only 0.07%, that's 7 in 10,000 of a major brand's followers ever engage with one of its Facebook posts. On Twitter, the number is even lower, about 3 in 10,000. Now remember, this isn't the population in general. These are the fools who turned themselves in and became followers of the brand. And yet, there are people in our business who actually believe that consumers are in love with brands. You go to their Twitter profiles. I'm passionate about brands. You're what? Dude, get a fucking girlfriend. Yes, having a strong brand should be every marketer's objective. And yes, the highest goal of advertising is to create a strong brand. But that's it. For the most part, consumers are not in love with your brand. They overwhelmingly do not want to have a conversation with it, or an authentic relationship with it, or engage with it, or dance with it, or spend a romantic seaside weekend with it. Of all the factors relating to consumer behavior, perhaps none is more mischaracterized than brand loyalty. If you're a marketer and you believe that people love your brand because they happen to buy it, you're headed for trouble. Most of what we call brand loyalty is simply habit, convenience, mild satisfaction, or easy availability. I promise you, if Pepsi would disappear tomorrow, most Pepsi loyalists would switch to Coke with very little psychological damage. Nike loyalists would throw on a pair of Adidas without having to enter rehab, and Big Mac lovers would cheerfully eat a Whopper without the need for counseling. You see, a lot of people have shaky jobs and unstable families. Many have illnesses. Many have debts. They have washing machines that are broken and funny things growing on their back and kids that are unhappy. They have a lot of things to care deeply about. I think it's very unwise to assume that they care deeply about our batteries, our wet wipes, and our frozen chicken strips. In fact, a smart marketer believes that no one gives a flying shit about her brand. She assumes she has to prove its value to her customers every day of the year. She takes nothing for granted. She doesn't believe that there are legions of brand ambassadors out there in cyberland advocating for her brand. If there are a few, great, but she's not going to bet the future on it. For a smart marketer, every day is Groundhog Day. Every day you have to get up, drag your ass to work, and remind the world once again why they should buy your stuff. The point is this: our brands are very important to us marketers and not very important to most consumers. Our next delusion is the digital delusion. Has digital and online technology become an important and inescapable part of our lives? Absolutely. Everything we in the communications business do now is online and digital. Our work is digital, our communications are digital, our expertise is digital, and that's the problem. As a result of all of our reliance on digital technology, we have made a very incautious leap of logic. We assume that digital technology, has made irrelevant everything that came before it. For over 10 years, we've been hearing about how the digital revolution is going to change everything. It was going to kill traditional advertising. It was going to kill television. It was going to kill everything in its path. Let's have a look at what we've been told over the past 10 years. We'll start with the supposed death of advertising. In 2004, researchers Forrester and Company proclaimed that we had reached the end of the era of mass marketing. think they must have forgotten to tell Apple that. In 2005, Joseph Jack, in his book, Life After the 30-Second Spot, said, the 30-second spot, at least as it exists today, is either dead, dying, or has outlived its usefulness. Take your pick. I think he forgot to tell Apple that. In 2008, Seth Godin, best-selling author on marketing, proclaimed the end of traditional advertising. He forgot to tell Apple that too. In 2009, Advertising Age said the post-advertising age is underway. Bob Garfield, columnist at Advertising Age, said in 2009, the present is apocalyptic. Any hope for a seamless transition, or any transition at all, from mass media and marketing to micro media and marketing, are absurd. The sky is falling. We are exquisitely, irretrievably fucked. Bob's a great guy, but he really needs a hug. And the Huffington Post just came out and said it last year, advertising is dead. So here's my dilemma. I'm confused. Everywhere I look, I see advertising. Just walk outside, it's on every building, every bus, every t-shirt, every bench, every napkin, every coaster, every milk carton, every boarding pass, every theater ticket, every square inch of the fucking planet is covered in advertising, and these schmucks are telling us it's dead. In fact, worldwide advertising expenditures have reached all-time highs. If our economies were growing at the same rate as advertising, we'd be dancing in the streets. I'm sorry, you can't kill advertising. On that final day when the big flaming asteroid bears down on our poor little planet, there'll be only two things left: cockroaches and copywriters. Along with the death of advertising, we were also promised the death of television. 2006, TechCrunch wrote, "Let's just declare TV dead and move on." From Wired magazine, "Traditional TV won't be here in 7 to 10 years." That was written in 2007. From The Telegraph that same year, "TV is dying," says Google expert. Also from that same year, Fox News wrote, "The internet is set to revolutionize television within 5 years." That was 8 years ago. Now let's look at the facts. Despite the brilliance of all these experts, in the first quarter of this year, 96% of all video viewing in the US was done on a television. 4% was done on a web device. How many people knew this number? We still spend far more time with TV than we do with digital devices. I think Jeff Bezos, CEO of Amazon, was a lot closer to reality last month when he said, "We're in a golden age of television." It's been over 10 years since we started hearing the nonsense about the death of television, and yet every media company in creation is now hysterically scrambling to own a piece of the television pie. Apple is, Amazon is, Hulu is, Yahoo is, Netflix is, Google is. Yes, people are watching TV in new and different ways, and consumption patterns are changing, but TV isn't dying, it's having babies. It all comes back to the digital delusion. You see, interactivity was going to make advertising so much more effective. Interactive advertising was going to disrupt the old forms of advertising and media and make them obsolete. Well, I'm sad to report that consumers have demonstrated almost no interest whatsoever in interacting with advertising. Display ads have a click rate of somewhere about 8 in 10,000. This is not interactivity. This is absence of interactivity. Solve Media, a company that measures this stuff, says you are more likely to complete Navy SEAL training than click on a banner. The idea that the same consumer who was frantically clicking her TV remote to escape from ads was going to joyfully click her mouse to interact with them is going to go down as one of the great marketing delusions of all time. What's just as bad is that among the few interactions that do occur, an alarming amount are fraudulent. According to a report by CNET, 38% of traffic on the web is human. How many people knew this? MediaPost says that one average botnet can produce 1 billion fraudulent ad impressions a day. And nobody knows how many average botnets there are out there, or above average ones. According to Adweek magazine, online ad fraud in the US may have reached $9.5 billion last year. And if the problems of consumer indifference and fraud aren't bad enough, there's also the problem of what we politely call viewability. A study done by Google a while ago reported that 56% of display ads paid for by advertisers were not viewable and never appeared in front of a live human being. A similar study reported in the New York Times claimed that 57% of 2 billion online video ads studied were also not viewable. A while back, Kraft, one of our largest advertisers, announced that it is rejecting between 75 and 85% of online ad impressions because they are deemed to be fraudulent, unsafe, unviewable, or unknown. Yet marketers are pouring more and more money into the black box of digital advertising. They don't know what they're buying, they don't know who they're buying it from, they don't know what they're getting, and they don't know how much they're paying. If there's a better definition of being on Mars, I'd like to know what it is. One more aspect of the digital delusion I want to talk about, ad blocking. All this hideous online ad tech that's stealing our privacy, spying on our every move, lying about our security, wasting our data plans, slowing down everything we do online, and annoying the shit out of us with ugly, maddeningly irritating advertising could be in for a big crash. Consumers are sick of it. In the UK, 40% of people are already using ad blockers. In the US, the use of ad blocking software increased 50% this year. Worldwide, it reportedly grew 70%. The ironic thing is that despite all the hype and all the money that has changed hands, it's my belief that online advertising has not been a strong advertising force. People often ask me how I can maintain such an obviously retro, old guy, unpopular opinion. And I tell them this: don't believe a word I say. Become a scientist. Do your own research. Go to the biggest supermarket in your neighborhood. Walk up and down the aisles and make a list of all the brands you can find that were built by online advertising. All the brands of toothpaste, and beer, and cereal, and soap, and soda, and snacks, and baked goods, and cheese, and shampoo, and tomato sauce. And I think you'll find what I found. You ain't got no list. 20 years into their lives as mainstream media, TV, and radio have built thousands of successful consumer-facing brands in hundreds of categories. Where are the big consumer-facing brands that have been built by online advertising? Sure, there are some big web-native brands that online advertising has built, Amazon and Netflix and Google. But how about the vast, overwhelming majority of brands that don't live on the web? Where are the brands of beer and soda and fast food, appliances and snacks that were built by online advertising? There's something striking about the phenomenal success of Apple. Despite being the world's premier technology company and one of the world's most successful online transactional marketers with their iTunes store, the overwhelming majority of Apple's advertising money is spent in non-digital media. They use the web brilliantly for their below-the-line stuff, and they do a fair amount of search, but their product advertising is dead old TV, outdoor, and print stuff. Yet somehow they've managed to survive. And oh yeah, become the world's most valuable company. And what have the new age wizards of marketing and advertising learned from Apple? Absolutely nothing. Finally, we have one last delusion to talk about. The age delusion. Now, is it important to address advertising to young people? Of course it is. They are the heavy users in a lot of consumer goods categories. But one of the practices of the ad industry that I've never understood is why we spend so much of our time, money, and energy talking to young people and so little talking to older people. I always assumed that there were some pretty good facts to justify this somewhere, and I just hadn't run into them. Well, if there are, I still haven't found them. Here's what I have found. According to Nielsen, people over 50 are the most valuable generation in the history of marketing. In September, the Bureau of Labor Statistics reported that people over 50 are now responsible for a majority of all consumer spending. They outspend the average consumer in nearly every category: food, household furnishings, entertainment, personal care, on and on. They account for 55% of all consumer packaged goods sales, and they dominate 94% of consumer packaged goods categories. They outspend other adults online on a per capita basis by 2 to 1. They have a net worth about 3 times that of other generations. They buy about 60% of all new cars. By the way, here's a fun fact for you. You know all the awesome millennials that we see in car commercials? Well, people 75 to dead buy 6 times as many new cars as people 18 to 24.
That's probably the biggest reaction.
You can't make this shit up. People over 50 control about 70% of the wealth in the US. If they were in their own country, they'd be the 3rd largest economy in the world. Let me ask you a question. Do you really think it's a good idea to ignore these people? And yet people over 50 are the target for 10% of US marketing activity. Why does this foolishness exist? Because marketers are from Mars. Here's what one automotive marketing moron had to say. The baby boomer generation is the largest cohort in the marketplace. Just by virtue of their numbers being so large, we'll continue to see them skew the data for a long time. Think about that for a second. They aren't really customers. They don't really buy things. They don't spend real money. They just skew the data. We have invented all kinds of bullshit for why we ignore people over 50. But the real reason we ignore them is that we hate them. The marketing and advertising industries hate old people. We like the excitement of youth, not the boredom of middle age and the frailties of old age. We can't build ourselves a hot advertising career by talking to old farts. Consequently, we have invented all kinds of convenient baloney to justify our malpractice. For example, we say they're dying out. In fact, between now and 2030, adults over 50 in the US will grow at 3 times the rate of adults under 50. We say they're stuck in their ways and they won't change brands. According to Nielsen, that was Nielsen, by the way. According to Nielsen, baby boomers are just as likely to change brands as younger people. We say they're downsizing. Between 1999 and 2009, spending among people 55 to 64 increased by 45%. We say by advertising younger, you automatically reach and influence people over 50. Really? Can you think of any other ethnic, demographic, or social group that anyone would claim is best influenced by advertising to someone else? Can you imagine someone claiming that the best way to influence women is to advertise to men? The whole science of marketing is based on finding the most relevant message and delivering it to the most probable buyer. Except when it comes to people over 50. Then all the rules are suspended because they don't count, they just skew the data. We say if you get them young, you'll have them for life. This is the lifetime value stupidity. Do you know anyone 50 who's wearing the same clothes, drinking the same beverages, driving the same car, eating the same food he did when he was 20, besides my brother-in-law? A while back, the stupidity of this argument was exposed in a study by the journal Science. A team of psychologists released a report which discredited what we call lifetime value. According to one of the authors of the study, we simply do not realize, quote, how transient our preferences and values are. We say they want to be like young people. Yeah, Michelle Obama, she's just dying to be like the doofuses in Taco Bell commercials. The mistake we make here is confusing wanting to be youthful with wanting to be like young people. Two very different things. Yes, people over 50 want to be youthful, but they do not want to be like young people. This is a distinction that is completely lost on our industry. The big problem is that there is almost no one over 50 left in advertising.
Amen.
We have successfully cleansed our industry of them. Our neglect of older consumers and our pandering to young people is nothing but narcissism disguised as strategy. It is marketing by selfie stick. I guess Forbes summed it up best. People over 50, they said, are the most ignored wealthy people in the history of marketing. Okay, I'm almost done here. You'll be able to get a drink in a minute. So there are a couple of things we need to understand. First, we are not being told the truth. The literature and the narrative of our industry have been hijacked by people with an agenda. They distort and camouflage the facts and conveniently neglect the facts that contradict their narrative. You are all intelligent, diligent, hardworking, well-meaning people. A number of times during this talk, I asked how many people knew certain very important facts. You overwhelmingly did not. No one knew any of them.
Until now.
Why? Why? These facts do not fit the narrative, and so they are unreported in the trade press and ignored by our industry experts. Despite our veneer of creativity, the advertising business is one of the most imitative and conformist businesses in the world. Once something becomes trendy, it is very difficult, in fact dangerous, for someone to go against the grain. I could never have said to my clients 2 years ago, when I was CEO of an ad agency, what I said here tonight. It would have been too dangerous. 3 quick final observations. First is a conclusion I reached years ago. Marketers are powerless in the presence of a shiny new object. The greatest fear of every CMO is the fear of being late to the newest marketing fad. Second, I believe we must be careful not to confuse the technology changes that have occurred in our industry with consumer behavior. They are two different things. And finally, we should understand that we almost always overestimate people's appetite for anything new. That's why 90% of new businesses fail, and we underestimate the power of traditional consumer behavior. Are things changing? Of course things are changing. Things are always changing. I'm not advocating that we should ignore technology, or that new media modes can't be useful, or that young people should be ignored. I'm not advocating any of that. What I'm saying is we need to maintain our perspective and get over our obsessions. We need to stop falling for the exaggerated, irresponsible baloney that has been sold to us by people with an ideological or financial interest in creating hysteria and promising miracles. We have become too gullible and too respectful. We need to encourage the quarrelsome, pugnacious people who make the arts vibrant and interesting. Even if they're crazy, even if they're annoying, they keep us honest and keep us on our toes. Here's my advice: give yourself the wonderful freedom of skepticism. Don't listen to loudmouths like me. Go out and dig up the facts for yourself and draw your own conclusions. Nobody is smarter than the facts. I'm astounded that a whole industry that's supposed to be creative and forward-thinking has been operating on unreliable principles and fanciful delusions that have been sold to us by people who have been wrong over and over. The marketing industry has been spending too much time on another planet. We need to get back down to earth. Thank you very much.